I wish that I'd been taught when I was at school. I'm an investor, a business owner, and a money educator. Understand it better, compound interest, cash flow, budgeting, investments, recover from debt. No one explained to me, put your money to work. It's about normalising the conversation.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Money Mechanics podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about all things money and investing. So in today's episode, I am joined by a guest of mine who is not a stranger to making bold money moves. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's an investor who's funded over £750 million in business loans. He's experienced massive success and also experienced the other end of the spectrum with personal bankruptcy. And today he's going to share his story, his journey that he's been on, and some insights into how he feels about money and investing and what we could maybe all be doing from that point. So Matt, hello, nice to see you here. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I always describe myself as a lifelong entrepreneur and maker of many mistakes. Long story short, as you alluded to in that lovely introduction, my core business revolves around raising capital and deploying it by lending it to UK SMEs. I got into that space because I was a prolific borrower whilst building and running my own businesses, and I still do build and run my own businesses. But basically, spent so much time being a borrower that I decided that qualified me to be to learn to be a lender as well. And I guess my core business today revolves around lending capital, taking a little equity stake here and there, and also just heavily advising the businesses that we work with, because as you say, I've had the lows as well as the highs, and I always believe that we don't really learn much until things go wrong, and it's managed to go pretty systematically wrong for me many times. So I use that as my highly expensive education that I impart on others free of charge.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. So we're going to kind of go back a little bit, and I'd really love to know what your earliest memory of money is and how you think that shaped you and the way that you treated money, behaved with money as you've moved through your life.
So I came from a good background, a well-off background. My parents weren't that before me, insofar as they came from blue collar families, and they came from council estates and etc. But my dad was the bloodline breaker, as Andy Elliott would say, and was the first person in his family to go to university. Ultimately started his own business, which from as early as I can remember, he always earned well, as in six-figure earner. We weren't gazillionaires by any stretch, but I always lived a good life, and never kind of wanted for anything. But I guess not normally successful people tend to tell a story of, I came from nothing and that gave me the what's the word? I guess the mindset that I was never going to be in that position, and I wanted to break out of that. Listen, I had nothing to break out of. I can't complain at all, but I just wanted more. And we had an apartment in Spain for a family summer holiday, but I wanted 3 houses in America and a private jet to get there. So that was the kind of context of the background that I came from. And in terms of, let's say, earliest money memories, I was just surrounded by business and my dad all the time, because as an entrepreneur, as an SME business owner, there is no real, well, for the successful ones anyway, there is no divide between home life and work life. So work came home went to work. Staff would come to our house for video training sessions. I mean, this is the days, VHS video training sessions from Tom Peters, and then my mum would serve everyone a curry in the kitchen afterwards. So I was always around this kind of stuff, but there's not one particular memory other than the fact that I was around it. Although, having said that, there was always one expression that my dad always used to have as a kid, and I guess we learn these things, don't we, from our parents, and then either go with them or realise they're bollocks as time goes on. And my dad always used to hear him say to people, "Pensions are rubbish. My business is my pension." And it probably wasn't until I was pushing 30 that I realised that was a horrendous piece of advice. And whilst I understand what he was saying in the context of him, there's many other reasons why I think that is terrible advice. So that was a long answer to a short question, wasn't it?
No, it's great. It's really good to get some insight into that. So you have been you are very successful now. You've been very successful throughout your career. You've also been bankrupt. So tell us a little bit about how that happened and how that impacted your confidence around money. Okay, a very short interruption of the episode, so I want you to get back to listening. I just wanted to remind you that the Money Mechanics weekly newsletter is completely free, and we'll send this out to you every week. All you've got to do is find the link in the show notes and get signed up. When we send this out to you, this weekly newsletter is going to include things that will help you to become a better money mechanic. It could be things like what's happening in the markets, things like budgets, how that's going to impact you. And I'm also going to share a lot of insight into what I'm doing in my own portfolio and in the portfolios of the guests we've got on the podcast to really just help you understand what you could do differently to make your money work as best as it can for you. Make sure you go and find that link and get signed up.
So it happened, the short of how it happened is because I was very over leveraged in 2008. I'd grown, at the time I was the biggest strip club operator in the UK. That was my exciting day job and claim to fame. And I had, other businesses as well, other leisure businesses, property and shops and shops and restaurants and all kinds of things. But everything was totally over leveraged. And when the 2008 credit crunch came and my lenders started to shut up shop and I had no liquidity or access to capital anymore, everything went under. As an aside, I think if I knew what I knew now, I could have probably prevented it from going under. Would that have necessarily been the best move? I don't know, but I think I could have understood how to negotiate better. That's why it happened. As a context, I guess a bit of context around bankruptcy. I always say to people that I don't really think it's something that should be feared or super overstressed. Now, again, obviously, I didn't know this as a 27-year-old going bankrupt at the time, but I think what I can very much see now and tell people is that for me, bankruptcy isn't this one big event that happens one day where everything then stops overnight. Bankruptcy is the last step in a journey that's been an absolute mess for many months, if not many years prior to that. And the analogy that I always give is basically a terminally ill cancer patient who has been dying slowly, probably painfully, on death's doorstep for a long time. And in the latter days and weeks before their death, they probably can't wait to die, and when that death happens, it's a kind of it's like a thank God that's happened, because it's taken me away from this pain and this suffering and everything else. And you don't wake up one day and go, "Oh my God, I'm fucked. I'm going bankrupt tomorrow." It's the. But I don't know what your language policy is on this podcast.
Don't worry about that. It's fine.
It's the culmination of red letters that have turned into non-payments. Staff wages not being paid, bailiffs coming, assets being seized. Whatever. Everybody's got, let's say, their own version of that story. But the bankruptcy is the end result of it. So for people who are in a pickle and, trying to, because normally everyone tries to avoid that bankruptcy, but avoiding bankruptcy is 9 times out of 10 just prolonging the agony, because, we can talk about, restructures or rejigging things around, but the reality is it's probably just best to clear the decks if you are that substantially underwater. So that's a little aside about bankruptcy.
Do you think that shaped or impacted your confidence around money at that point or later on?
Not back then, because I didn't understand. Listen, everything I tell you now, I tell you from having it having happened to me in 25 years of experience on top of it. Then I didn't know these things back then at the time. Obviously, if these things happen to me again today, then I do know these things, and I can behave differently. Back then, I was told by everyone around me that my life was over, my career was over. I'd never be working again. I'd never be in business again. I could never make money again. And if I'd have listened to people, that probably would have been a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, and no, I didn't listen to people, not because I was, let's say, gung-ho and ballsy or knew a better answer than them. My answer was just simply, well, hang on. I mean, I can't let you be right, because if you are right, then that means that at 27 years old, I'm out of the game. My 1-year-old kid's not getting fed, and my missus is probably going to leave me. Did I have a better answer and a plan? No, but I just knew I wasn't going to sit at home and watch Jeremy Kyle. I was just going to get out there and get back on the horse. So that's how I saw it back then. If you ask me to kind of, let's say, re-answer that question as of today with 25 years of experience, I would say that people go, when you went bankrupt, you lost everything. What was it like to lose everything? And I can say now, I didn't lose everything. I lost my money. I didn't lose anything else. I didn't lose my contact base, my knowledge, my skill sets, my network. If anything, my skill sets moved up a level, because I've just been through a bankruptcy and just learned something new then. So I guess my advice to anyone today is to make yourself be in a position where money is something that I'm not going to say you're happy it comes and goes, because look, we don't want it to go. Let's be real, right? But I don't fear these things today, because I'm not controlled by money. Yes, I want nice things, but I know that whether I'm driving a Rolls Royce or a Mini, I'm still the same me. And I also know that if I am driving a Mini today, it won't be long till I'm back in a Rolls Royce, because I've got the underlying skill sets to be able to make money. So I guess that's what gives me the confidence now. Not that I'm so fearless and crazy and don't care. It's that I know that, look, if I lose the bankruptcy. So if I went bankrupt and lost everything, I know I can make it again tomorrow. In the same way David Beckham misses a penalty, he knows that was just yesterday. That was just yesterday's kick. He knows he's going to make another one tomorrow and the day after. Yeah,
I think it's really interesting, because I think a lot of people avoid bankruptcy, they avoid debt, they stick their head in the sand, because when they see the worst case scenario of going bankrupt and losing everything, in inverted commas, I think society's taught us that is losing everything, because our value is really closely attached to how much money we have in a lot of cases, or we've been taught that that's the case. So for somebody who's listening to this, who's maybe struggling with debt, who is really frightened of maybe going into that bankruptcy, or is like on the verge, just really struggling, what would you say to them in terms of how to sort of separate from the emotional aspect of it and the practical aspect of it to kind of make just a step forwards? What would your advice be?
So you've got to take a step back and just run the numbers. You've got to unemotionally run the numbers. If let's put it into a business context, because it still works the same, personal or business. If you've got a business, for example, with £1 million of debt, and that business makes 50 grand a year profit. Now, I can tell you this firsthand, because these kind of guys come to me every day. They come to me to borrow £1 million. I said, what for? Oh, well, to repackage his debt. I said, but mate, you're making 50 grand a year. You've been making 50 grand a year for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Not that I'm disrespecting the amount of money you're making, but there's nothing in that business that's going to change to suddenly start making 500 grand a year. So you're going to be making 50 grand a year. Even if I give you an interest-free loan, you'll be paying me back for the next 20 years. If I start to apply basic bank interest to it, you'll be paying me for 30 years. You'll be dead. But it's the emotion that says, I don't want to go bankrupt. I don't want to go bankrupt. You already are bankrupt. You just haven't signed the papers yet. So people fear bankruptcy because they say, well, I'm going to lose my credit rating. I'm not going to be able to buy a house. I'm not going to be able to do this, that, and the other. As I was saying a minute ago with that, kind of dying person analogy, your credit's already shot to shit, right? If yes, you might not say bankrupt on your documentation, but it still says he's a person that's never going to get a penny lent to them. Therefore, clean the decks and move on, because
so what you're saying is, sometimes it's better to just get it done so that you can move forward into the next chapter without carrying all the shit with you.
Absolutely. And listen, I'm not trying to be blasé about it. I'm not trying to glamorize it or promote it. But ultimately, it's just a simple mathematical equation. Mm-hmm. Can you, I mean, obviously, I know your backstory, revolves around being in 60 grand worth of debt and then, fighting your way out of that. Now, I don't know your numbers, but I do know from the conversations that we had when we did our podcast that you were successfully property broking and stuff like that. So I would imagine you were let's just say for argument's sake, you were making 100 grand a year and you were living off, you were paying 30 grand worth of tax and living off 30 or 40 grand. It would take you 18 months, 2 years to pay that debt off. Yeah. That is a completely different scenario for someone like you. And I wouldn't advocate that. I wouldn't advocate the bankruptcy. Why? Because listen, if you can avoid it. But if you were sat at home, not being a good earner, not knowing how you were going to earn, being anxious every time there's a knock on the door, then what's the point? Press the button, clear the decks, and move on. And you've got to just apply maths and logic and not emotion to it.
Yeah. Okay, good advice.
But what I say, that's looking at bankruptcy in and of itself. It fixes you today. It's not going to fix you tomorrow if you've not got a skill set that's going to then go and allow you to earn some money. So obviously, I assume I'm talking to your educated audience who are hungry people who have some skills or want to layer on more skills to make money, as opposed to someone who's not worked in the last 7 years and sits at home collecting a dole check. But that's the important bit. Look, use the lack of emotion and the logic to clear the decks. But then once you've got a clear head, get out there and make it count for something.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you: has having money ever made you feel lonely?
No. I don't think so, because I talk about money in the same way I talk about alcohol. That it's it's an amplifier, not for me. It's an amplifier, not a changer. When people go, "Oh, that guy, he's such an idiot when he's drunk." No, he's an idiot anyway. Yeah, anyway. It's just that the drinking makes him even worse. And people go, "Oh, money's changed him. It's made him really cocky." And no, he was cocky anyway, but he's just got more ability to be cocky because he's looking down on people. So I've never really been a lonely person or a person lacking confidence or any of those things. And listen, that's not something I can particularly translate into advice for other people. Mm-hmm. It's just a character trait of me.
I think money amplifying what's already there is something that a lot of people listening to this will be entirely unaware of, because I've definitely experienced this with friends, people I've worked with, business partners, and the more money someone gets doesn't, like you say, change them. It just creates more of what's over there. And if actually you are inherently a good person that wants to do good things, who is generous, having more money will allow you to be more generous. And I find with a lot of people I speak to, they have an underlying belief that if they suddenly become successful, if they suddenly have money, they will change. What's your sort of words around that you would say to anyone who's got that in a narrative, like, I don't want to make loads of money, or even if it's a self sort of subconscious place, I don't want to go and make loads of money because when I do, I'll become an arsehole. How do people make sure they get out of that pattern?
I think these are probably stories that people tell themselves so that they don't take the risks, and take the chances, or put themselves to the effort in the test of making that money. Because I mean, if you're saying to yourself, "I don't want to change in case I become an idiot," well, listen, the only person who's in control of that is you. And ultimately, like anything, we say guns don't kill people. People with guns kill people. Money is never a bad thing, but money in the wrong hands can be a bad thing. How can money ever be a bad thing? Because everything, it's the oxygen that fuels our lives. And we all want to spend it in different ways. And if you'd have asked me how I wanted to spend it 20 years ago, I'll give you a different answer to 10 years ago and a very different answer to what I'll tell you today. And if you ask me today, I'm probably happy to earn lower amounts than I would have wanted to earn 5 or 10 years ago. But believe me, there'll never be a day I don't want money. If you'd have asked me, again, like I said, 10 years ago, I still was, I want the private jet. I want money because I want private jets. I want chunky, lumpy material things. I'm not, now I still want nice things, obviously live in a nice place here, etc. But it really is more about the peace and quiet and freedom and stuff. But even at the basis level, let me tell you, I never, ever look at a price in a supermarket. I would rarely look at the price on an item when I go shopping, depending on the kind of shop it is. How freeing is that mentality? Yeah. And you can't do that without money. Or you can't pay for the accidents that have. My mom needs a hip replacement now. I can pay for that tomorrow. I don't have to think about these things.
It greases the wheels, and like you say, it creates more of the life that you want. And without any money, it's really hard to have that. So let me ask you, Matt, what would you say is your biggest financial non-negotiable? So a thing that you always spend money on no matter what.
I always spend money on no matter what. That's it. You put me on the spot thinking about it, and sometimes people will go, "Oh well, I'll always travel business class," and that's my. I'm pretty simple. It's hard to say no to the kids. And I love my red wine, and I love good food. I mean, I would never ever be in a restaurant and knock back a meal that I want to buy, or a bottle of wine that I want to drink. And like I say, unless it was something utterly ludicrous, the kids can always have whatever they want. I mean, I would always I like to, for example, travel business class, not economy. But again, I'm pretty chilled. I don't have an ego about it. If I'm feeling not so flush one week and the business class price is bonkers and the economy price is cheap, I'm happy. I'm happy to do it. I think it's less an individual non-negotiable and more just that thing that having the money makes me relax. Therefore, I don't want to lose chunks of it on particular things.
What would you say is the smartest investment you've ever made?
In myself, the old cliche. I mean, in me and in my businesses. I mean, I do in, let's say, passive investing. I got a pension. I'd take advantage when I lived in the UK. I'd take advantage of ISAs and those kind of things. But that was, and I would have property, and all of these things have made money and will compound over a longer period of time. But the biggest uplifts, money I ever make have been in my own businesses or in skill sets of mine. Whether that's taking a course or being in a mastermind or an event or whatever it may be.
And what are you investing in now? So obviously you invest in yourself and your development, understanding, community, network, all those things. Is there, and again, we can't give financial advice on this podcast, but is there an investment or an asset class that's really interesting for you right now, or where you kind of see the world moving towards?
So I've always, for a long time, been in private credit, as in lending to other businesses, which is an asset class that I guess probably wasn't even considered an asset class when I first started doing it. But today it's very much talked about as private credit. And, I'm very much in that, and I will very much continue to be in that, as time goes forward. I think for me, I can tick two boxes with it. That, listen, I've made decent capital sums from businesses that I've started and grown, but I'm not into wildly speculative stuff, and particularly wildly speculative stuff I don't understand. So I'm not a crypto guy. I'm not an oil and gas or commodities or whatever these things are if I don't understand them. But I can get a double whammy, if you like, with private credit, in that I can generate long-term returns at 12, 13, 15, 18%, which are secure and will compound time upon time upon time. And that, if I play the long game, that 12 to 18% compounded over many years gets very, very exciting as the curve goes out. But I can also then magnify that in the short term by effectively businessifying that and raising capital from third parties at less and lending it out at more. Yeah. So I get to effectively compound an almost infinite amount. If I'm borrowing at 8% and lending at 15%, and making that 9% spread, that's 9% compounding on an infinite ROI. So that's really where I am. I mean, sure, for some people it sounds boring, because the other thing is, people always come to me and say, I want to, give me some investment advice. I've got 10 grand to invest. I've got 15 grand to invest, and I need 200 grand next year. Well, it's not happening, mate. I mean, it's not. Maybe you can go and find a crypto coin. But personally, I think you'd be better off taking it to the casino, because it's not the answer people want, because it's boring and it doesn't tell them what they want to hear, and it doesn't tick that box of instant gratification. But the real winners are the people who can sit it out over time. And I'm not saying that as someone who's known this for 44 years. I'm saying someone who's known and understood this for 4 or 5 years and completely gone against that principle for the previous 20, which has ultimately held me back so much.
So what do you think that... so let me just come back to something you said, which was you don't really want to overcomplicate things. You just want to invest in what you know, basically. When people are starting to think about investment, and whether it's 10 grand, whether it's £1,000 or it's $1 million, doesn't really matter. Do you think that there is power in investing in what you understand, and what, like, as a beginner, if you're only just starting to scratch the surface on things, should you not invest and learn, or should you invest just a little bit and kind of start learning whilst doing? What do you think is kind of the better option?
So I think absolutely people should only be investing in what they know and understand. I also think that if we take out the wild numbers from, let's say, particular cryptos or particular pie in the sky asset classes, within reason, most asset classes will return something semi-similar. Now, whether that's 9 or 10, whether it's 10 or 12, there's not something doing 3 and something doing 33. Within reason, there's all the kind of core asset classes will be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever percent. Therefore, why pick one that you understand, or pick one that you like and you want to learn about, pick it, stick with it, and play the long game. Because, as I said a minute ago, the only real winner is the person who can sit and play that long game. And all you want to be able to do is find something that can provide an inflation-beating return, and do it consistently for as long as you possibly can.
Why do you think most people don't do that? Why is it that we have...
Because it's boring, it's boring, and we haven't got 30 years to wait. But the problem is, if we can't wait 30 years, we'll end up waiting 60 years.
And this culture of you can make £10,000 into £200,000 in 12 months, this kind of hustle culture that's led us to believe that you can be, passively financially free within 3 months, and these sorts of things. What do you say to that space?
That I think is absolute rubbish. That, for me, when I say passive income doesn't exist, okay, of course passive income exists, but passive income can only come from money that was once made actively.
Yes.
And for people to say, oh no, well, this guy, if I pay him £10,000, he's going to give me 7% a week passive, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just absolute rubbish. If it's not a scam, then it's something where it's got a wildly high risk. The only good advice is to start as early as you can. Find something that will safely produce market-beating returns or inflation-beating returns, and sit it out. And I think we talked about this when you came on my podcast. My eldest daughter is somewhere upstairs now, and she is almost 19. And I was saying to her from the second she turned 18, I've been hammering on at her about the importance of investing and putting money away each month. Which is something I never did, and I forget the exact numbers, and you'll understand these numbers better than me, because I'm sure you talk about them every day with your clients. But there is a very modest sum that you can put away every month, and have it earning a modest 8, 9, 10% return for 18 to 20 years that will make you a millionaire, guaranteed. And it is a modest sum. And I've said to my daughter, and I always used to try and push her into business, or push her into wanting to like business, because that was like my thing, and I wanted her to be my little protege. And it never happened. She didn't like that. She's going to uni. She wants to be an engineer. But I said to her, and I'll say to anyone, that owning your own business, making money from business, and being wealthy in life are kind of mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. And you can go, and I've said to Harley, okay, you don't want to run a business, you don't want to know anything about business, you want to be your engineer, but you can still be an engineer, put this modest amount of money away each month, and as boring as 20 years is away for you now, 20 years still makes you 6 years younger than I am now. And to be able to have £1 million in your bank, whilst probably owning your own house and still being the engineer, that's freedom.
A lot to be said for that.
That's success. That's financial success. That is life. And I think we too many people take the financial advice from the sexy Instagram videos and the guys on the Lamborghinis and stuff. And I think if you were to say what's one book someone could go and read, or one place where someone could go and get financial advice, I only relatively recently read Morgan Housel's what's it called, the Psychology of Money book, mm-hmm. and the kind of the things he writes about in there, that for example, having a pot of cash worth, say, 6 or 9 months expenses, which most financial gurus will tell you that's crazy. You only want 1 month expenses or 6 weeks expenses, because you want the rest of it locked up producing returns for you. But Morgan talks about it in the context of, but what if having that 6 or 9 months money gave you the freedom to sack your job off and go on safari or hitchhiking around? These are the things that I could never understand this or even think in these terms 20 years ago. But now, having lived it, done it, made the mistakes, and that's the important thing with money. That's the freedom. Listen, if you've got 20 million, there's no difference between 20 and 50. If you've got 50, there's no difference between. You might be flying on a shared private jet versus your own private jet. Yeah. Things do not change at that level. The things where it really changes is whether you earn 25 grand a year or 100 grand a year, or whether you've got no savings or 6 months savings, or do you live in a 200 grand house that's paid off, or £1 million house with 200 grand of equity and an 800 grand mortgage that you're busting your ass for 7 days a week and you can't make ends meet. I think these are the things that sound so boring, but believe me, are so important.
So the next question I was going to ask you, you've kind of touched on this anyway, I think, is if you could rewrite one cultural rule that we seem to stick to as a community, as society, what rule would you change? What would you rewrite?
I think listen, you might not like this being a property person, and I am all. I mean, I invest in
property and other things, but
no. But listen, I'm all for investing in property, but I also don't like the kind of de facto rule of, you've got to own your own house, and you've got to outhouse yourself, and you've got to buy it as early as possible, etc., etc. Listen, if you are investing in property as part of a balanced portfolio and you're doing it at the right time, all the right stuff, then fine. But if you're completely breaking your neck to own a house because you think it's your biggest asset when really it's probably your biggest liability if you're not doing anything else. It's a bad move. It anchors you geographically, it anchors you financially, and it's also not your best investment if that's your only investment.
I think this is really interesting, and I wrote about this in Money Mechanics, is that, and I've gone to head with people on Instagram about this, on TikTok and everything, is that we, especially in the UK, British people, we believe that our home is our biggest asset. Actually, it's a liability because it costs us money, interest rates, maintenance. It's probably not for now, but there's loads of reasons why your own home is in fact a big liability. Buy-to-let, different, where money is being made from the money that you've invested, that's a different thing. But why do you think we are so attached to our homes being our biggest asset? Like, what is it that's creating that and maintaining that, even though information's out there?
I guess probably a few things. I mean, listen, people only listen to the information that they want to hear, for starters. I mean, all the answers to everything are out there, but it still doesn't stop 90% of the world making the same mistakes time after time. I would probably, I mean, listen, I am no economist, but I would probably imagine that back in the day, owning your own house as a de facto thing to do at 18, 19, 20 years old probably was the right move. And you know, before inflation had kicked in and all the other problems had kicked in, it probably did make sense, because I mean, again, I don't know all these numbers like you know the numbers, but there was a time when, you know, a married man could be the only working person in the family. His missus could be a housewife. They could have 2 kids, own their own house, and all live a lovely life. Money. From a bang average salary. Yeah. Now, I speak to people every single day who are earning 150 grand a year, and, you know, with 1 child, living somewhere in England, saying, I can't make ends meet, and my wife is now going to have to work part time. I mean, that is wild. So things have just changed. Listen, you know, the economy's changed, money's changed, prices have changed. But why do people still do it now? I guess they're emotionally attached to that ideal from before. You know, we've all got a story of a parent, a grandparent, or a mate's uncle or someone who bought a house for 10 grand that's now worth 400 grand. You know, back in 1960 or something. So we hang on to these things, and I guess, also people just don't run the numbers. You know, they'll go, well, my house, I bought it for 200 and it's now worth 400. Therefore, I've made 200 grand. Well, you know, there's so much to put into that equation, you know, whether it's time value of money, whether it's opportunity cost on what you put in, whether it's talking about your repairs, your maintenance and all your other things.
Interest rates, the mortgage.
Interest rate. Lost opportunity for the fact that you geographically anchored yourself there and could have taken a better paying job in Hong Kong or whatever, you know, whatever it may be. There's so much more to put into the equation that people don't do so. And also, listen, if we want to believe something, we just believe it at all costs, don't we? I mean, that's just the psychology of life.
So we're going to wrap up in a minute. I've got a couple more questions for you. What do you think the biggest lie is that we've been sold about wealth and building wealth and being wealthy?
The biggest lie is that being wealthy is for the rich, and everybody else just has to sit back and watch them do it. You know, can everyone be a billionaire? No. Can everyone be a business owner? No. Should everyone be a business owner? No. But can everyone do better? Absolutely.
Amazing. So I want to wrap this episode off. What we're going to do at the end of each of the episodes is we're going to ask our current guest to leave a question for our next guest. So have you got a question that you think we should ask our next guest relating to money, having it, enjoying it, spending it, investing it, losing it, anything?
What is your biggest financial loss, and do you regret it?
Great. We will definitely get that asked. And once I've asked it, I'll also send you the answer. Matt, thank you so much. Do you want me to leave you with telling you why I asked the question? That'd be great. And how I answer it. So I've always, I used to be a prolific spender on many things that I'm a lot more controlled on now. And there was a time when I bought a lot of art. I mean, this is, you know, I don't know, let's say around, not far from the time when I was going bankrupt in 2007, 2008. And I probably had 700-800 grand worth of art, which back in those days was, you know, was even bigger money than 700 or 800 grand worth of art.
And it all, I lost half of the stuff. The rest of it went to zero, and it was ridiculous. I got completely scammed. A few years later, people would often ask me, "Oh, do you remember all that art you bought? I bet you regret that, don't you? What would you do if you had that money back?" And I always say, listen, I hate these conversations because they are hypothetical wastes of time. It's like, so what if your mom didn't meet your dad and then you wouldn't be here today? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, what happened, and there's nothing we can change. But I also believe that because, I just look at the simplicity of, am I happy today? And if I'm happy today, then anything that came before today, I'm not going to moan about. And if I look at the art and they go, well, if you didn't buy that art, you'd have had another 600 or 700 grand or whatever. I said, I wouldn't, because I'd have spent it on something else for starters. And also, secondly, if I didn't buy that art, I wouldn't have met the art dealer. If I didn't meet the art dealer, he wouldn't have become my mate. He wouldn't have called me on that chance day in Las Vegas when one of his other clients happened to be in Las Vegas and said, "Oh, I'm going to take you guys both for dinner because you might like each other." And not only do we like each other, he then became my business partner for the next 10 years. And listen, I'm not into the law of attraction and magic and all that carry on, right? But I'm very much, simplistic around that, what's happened, and how do we make the best out of the situation? So ultimately, any financial disasters I've had, they were what they are. I can't change them. All I can do is learn from them. Am I happy today? Well, if I'm happy today, then I can't moan about the past. If I'm not happy today, I better get on and find a way to change it.
Amazing. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been amazing. I can't wait to get this episode out.
Thanks for having me.
Feedback will be amazing. So last, just to finish off, how can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you? Can they follow you on Instagram? Where are you hanging out? Where can people find you?
In terms of social, I am the Matt Haycox, TheMattHaycox on pretty much everything. I've got a website, matt-haycox.com. I've got my own podcast. Obviously, you were a great guest on a couple of weeks ago. I write a newsletter. Come and find me anywhere. Google me. I'm not hard to find, and I'm always putting out content. I've got a few newsletters and offers and other bits and pieces, and always love to interact.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. It's been fantastic to hear from you. And I will make sure all of the links and everything are all in the show notes. Guys, if you've been listening, enjoyed this, make sure you drop us a review on the platform that you're listening. And that's it from us. We will speak to you again soon. Thank you so much for getting to the end of the podcast episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind you that the weekly Money Mechanics newsletter is available to you completely free. This is a newsletter I'm going to send out every week to just give you some ideas around what's happening in the markets, what's happening at a global level, what's happening at a lot more local level, so that you can better understand what you can do with your money to make it work for you for the future. I'm also going to share in the newsletter what I'm doing in my own portfolio, just to give you some insights into what my ideas are, why I'm making the decisions that I'm making, in the hope that it will help you to make those decisions in your own portfolios as well. All you've got to do is find the link that's with this episode, hit the link and subscribe, and that newsletter will start to come out to you every single week. I'd also really love to take this opportunity to invite you to drop me a review. I love the opportunity of getting to share these podcast episodes with you. It really helps me to better understand how we can do the best job that we can here at Money Mechanics if you tell us your feedback. So drop us a review, tell us the sort of guests that you want, talk to me and connect with me on Instagram, talk to us on YouTube, wherever you are hanging out. Tell us how you're finding it, and we can make this the very best podcast it can be. Thank you again for being such a valued listener. I appreciate you all, and I'll speak to you soon.